I think most of us at credit unions believe that we are selling or providing a better product or service than our competitors, but we have to get that message out there, and we have to be cognizant that consumers often take the path of least resistance. So if they're going to have to wait a day or two or go to a branch to open an account with you, and they need an account, or they're tired of their overdraft fees or whatever else they're dealing with at their other institution, they'll go to whoever can give them that instant decision. Yeah, obviously you don't want to sell people products that are misleading or don't suit their needs.
The Digital Banking Podcast is powered by Typhon. Typhon is the creator of Infinia, a dramatically better digital banking platform for community financial institutions, as well as several platform-agnostic, revenue-generating point solutions. Our highly configurable platform and broad ecosystem of third-party partners ensure our entire suite is scalable and extensible to meet the needs of any FI. On our podcast, you will hear host Josh DeTar discuss today's most pressing financial technology topics with seasoned industry experts from every possible discipline.
You know, your podcast hasn't officially made it until there's ads in it. But this is one you're not going to want to skip past. And, well, if you do, feel free to hit that fast forward 15 seconds button twice. Ever wonder what gives me my energy and enthusiasm during these podcasts? You know, outside of my relentless desire to learn about, connect, share, and build up community FIs and their mission to support the communities they serve? It's coffee, and lots of it. Now, you want to know what's better than your regular old coffee? How about donating $5 to the Children's Miracle Network hospitals through Credit Unions for Kids every time you purchase high-quality, ethically sourced coffee that also provides living wages to coffee farmers? So if you want to listen to this episode with epic levels of caffeine-induced focus and help kids in need, head to javaforkids.org to learn more and buy a bag or 10. Thanks.
Welcome to another episode of the Digital Banking Podcast. My guest today is Laszlo Tallai, the VP of Digital Strategy for Communication FCU. I have been looking forward to this episode for the last 70 days. You see, 70 days ago, the most curious contact form submission on our website came through for a gentleman with Flat Earth Credit Union. We're going to get into that in this episode, but if that doesn't pique your interest to stick around, well, I don't know what's going to. From that day on, I was committed to finding the person behind this and thank them for making my day. Today, I am so pumped to say the person behind this incredible bucket of laughs, Mr. Laszlo, is here on the podcast with me. Laszlo said that even dating back to junior high, he's always been a practical joker. Maybe sometimes taking it a little too far, but where's the fun if you're not flirting with the line, right? As a teenager, Laszlo had the typical jobs of a teenage boy, but in college, got a really exciting opportunity to be one of the first employees for an aftermarket automotive hardware and software company. And as a self-prescribed car guy, this, coupled with a boss that really set him up for success and let him expand what he worked on and allowed him to shoot for the moon and make mistakes, made this his dream job. Growing that organization and ultimately leading everything from digital to marketing to customer acquisition and conversion, and being involved in working with software and technologists gave Laszlo a really deep set of e-commerce skills in a rapidly evolving digital world. Now, after the high pace of the automotive tech and e-com world, Laszlo said, you know what, I'm ready to just have a 9 to 5 or maybe even like a 9 to 3:30 chill job where I don't get so emotionally attached to the work and can just check out when I go home. So he thought, well, what a better industry than banking? Let's get me some banker's hours. Little did he know, his highly driven personality was not going to let him do that. He started with the credit union 6 years ago and is now more passionate than ever about the work he's doing and the impact he's having. So I guess the joke's on him on this one. I tell you what, I love to see incredibly successful and intelligent people who take what they do really seriously, but try not to take themselves too seriously. And honestly, Laszlo is an absolute shining example of that. So Laszlo, 70 days in the making, man. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Josh. I'm super excited to be here. I didn't know Flat Earth Credit Union would get so much attention, especially so long after I launched it.
I know. So we've got to start with this whole thing. And I think it's important to give people a little bit of the genesis of like what brought us together. You know, for anybody who listens to this podcast or that knows me personally, or maybe just through, you know, some of my social media profile or whatever, I would like to think that hopefully people see myself as a pretty lighthearted, happy-go-lucky, fun-loving guy too. And I love a good joke as much as the next person. And I really love an opportunity to not take things too serious. And so it was really funny. You know, I wake up in the morning and kind of the first thing that I usually do is like I grab my cup of coffee. I'm scrolling through Slack on my phone to see what's going on. And one of the guys from my team, Caleb, is just blowing me up on Slack. I mean, I don't remember what it was, Laszlo, but it was hilarious. It was like 30 or 40 messages on Slack. I was like, what is going on? And he's based East Coast and I'm Pacific. So he's been up a few hours before I am. And he's like, dude, you're never going to believe what came through on the website. He's like, you've got to check this out. And he did a pretty good job of just being excited about it, getting me all pumped up about it, but like not really leading me on to that he had already discovered it was a joke. And so what it was this Flat Earth Credit Union had requested a demo of our platform on our website. And so I go to the website of this Flat Earth CU and I start looking around. I'm like, wow, this sounds like a joke. Like Flat Earth CU, like this can't be real, right? But I'm looking at the website and I was like, it's really good. Like it's really high quality. It's like somebody put a lot of thought into this. And I'm like scrolling around and there's like product lines and sets that make sense, that line up with the value prop of why I might be a member of a friggin' credit union called Flat Earth Credit Union. There's debit card artwork. I was like, no way somebody puts this much work into something for a joke. And if they did, like this is the most epic joke of all time. And then you start to dig deeper and I'm like, okay, no, I see where this is a joke. Like they're letting me know that they're just having some fun with this. But then it just became like wildfire within our organization, right? We start spamming this all over the Slack channels and everybody's like, this is the funniest thing we've seen in forever. And we're like, we love that somebody has taken like a practical joke to this level. And so then I got on LinkedIn and I was like, I have to know who did this because I want to shake their hand. I want to take them out to dinner, which I still owe you, by the way, Laszlo. And I'm going to hold true to that, man. And I'm going to take them out to dinner. I'm going to say thank you for making my day because this is the funniest thing I'm going to see all year. And so I post this on LinkedIn and I think what's really interesting about that, and we're going to kind of take this in two parts, is one, just how many people's day it made. Like, I thought that was really cool. I got so many messages from people that were like, dude, seriously, I needed this in my day. Thank you for putting this in front of me. Like, this is hilarious. And then seeing how much time people spent like going through and looking at all the granularity of the jokes you put in there and like how much work you put into it. But then there was a second side that was like, I think even Ron Shevlin was one of the people that commented something to the effect of like, yeah, I knew right away that this was a joke because no real credit union would have a website this good, you know? And so it sparked some really interesting conversation. And I know that's a lot of me talking to set this up, but I wanted to give people some of the context of what got me so excited about this was, again, I think this was a really cool exemplification of somebody who takes what they do really serious and like you truly understood what you were doing when you built this and were able to build it at a really sophisticated manner. But you also were just like being yourself and having some fun. So like walk us through the whole genesis of like, how did this start and become what it became to where I ended up stumbling across this when you reached out through our website using it?
Yeah, and my last job at 034 Motorsport, we had a habit of launching April Fool's Day products. We've been doing it probably, since 2011 or so. And they always had a good reaction from that community, which is a little different. There's enthusiasts for automotive, not so much for credit unions, but we do have some very, very loyal members that are credit union diehards. And so I had just started at the credit union at the very end of 2018. And so 2019 was rolling around and I was like, man, I wish we could do an April Fool's rebrand of the credit union. Yeah, I was new, so I didn't know all the the nuances of the credit union world. People need to trust you with their money. People have been members since the 1939 in some cases. So I just went ahead one weekend. I had seen the documentary Behind the Curve on Netflix. It's about the flat Earth community. It's fascinating and worth a watch. And I was like, man, we got to do flat Earth credit union. Like, this is the ethos of a credit union, right? A passionate group of people. They share a common bond, right? The belief in the shape of the Earth. And I think it was just a weekend. I went and grabbed a WordPress theme, hosted on AWS with Bitnami or something, and kind of picked one that felt like the right theme to start with, and just started, adding content, figuring out who would found Flat Earth Credit Union, what would the employees look like, what would the products be, and I kind of really laid into some of the kind of high notes of that documentary to, do the curve-free checking and the find the edge exploration loans and some of those things that are in there, and just put the credit union spin on it. Did some low quality Photoshop work, and came in. It was probably mid-March at this point, or late March, and I was like, Steven, our CMO, I was like, Steven, what if we just sent an email to our members on April 1st and said, hey, we're excited to say we're rebranding to Flat Earth Credit Union? And Steven's great. He laughed, and he's like, that's great, but there's absolutely no way the board will go for this. Steven's awesome. He's he also is one of those people that takes things to an extreme, and there's a good amount of joking and lightheartedness in our department at the credit union, because we all think alike in that sense. And so that's how it was born. They got some traction on Reddit and a few places. On April 1st, we did a little soft launch through my viral marketing channels. And every so often since April of 2019, there's been spikes in traffic and people have seen it. But I just kept the satellites to kind of use as like a staging site for some of the things we were doing at the credit union, whether it was testing deep links or filling out forms for product demos from Typhone. And you just get all those emails going. And anyway, so that's what it hung around doing. And then a few months ago, I think Sanjay from Digital Credence or Sundeep, one of them messaged me saying, Flat Earth Credit Union is blowing up on LinkedIn. And I was like, wait, what? And I came across her post. And so I've kept it anonymous. I didn't really see much of a need to take credit for a kind of waste of time website. But I was like, man, this guy's saying he's going to buy me dinner. So I'm signing up. I'm going to get some ROI. I'm going to add up the hosting costs before our dinner, but I'm going to expect you to cover about 5 years.
It needs to be a nice steak and a good glass of wine. Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know. That's why I got so latched onto this personally, Laszlo, was I love seeing people take it to the nth degree, right? And like, you're personally out of pocket paying hosting fees to keep this silly thing alive. And that was why a part of me really wanted to find you, was because I knew that was probably the case, right? That it was probably somebody that created this as a joke, but actually put a lot of thought and care into it, and then has kept it up. And I was like, I genuinely want this person to know how much they made my day, and then how many other people's day they made. And I think a part of it too was, especially when you talk about like our industry, right? And the fact that you were like, we could never actually get this, board approved to rebrand the credit union for a day on April 1st to Flat Earth Credit Union, because people need to trust the credit union with their money and their financial security and all of those things, right? And it's really easy to erode it. But at the same time, I argue that you can find the most stodgy person in banking that wears their suit every single day the same way. They still like to laugh. Like, at the end of the day, we're all still human. And we still want to have fun. And I don't know about you, but life's a lot better when you're smiling and having fun and laughing than when you're not, right? So just the fact that this thing that you built back in 2019 brought so many people in my circle, like so much laughter and joy. I mean, I'm telling you, it was like weeks after that post, I was still getting texts from friends, and they're like, dude, I went back to this site because I just needed a laugh. I found this other little nugget. Have you found this nugget? I mean, it's pretty cool, man.
Thank you. it gave me a lot of pleasure making it. So I'm glad it gave some people, laughs.
I'm genuinely curious. How much time do you think you have vested in it?
I mean, to get it launched, probably like 20, 30 hours. Not a ton.
Yeah.
Once you spin up websites, especially if you're running with the theme, I mean, I'm not counting the time thinking about what it would be like, but my mind just does that on its own. It's probably a little bit of undiagnosed ADHD, but it's a bit of a superpower.
Yeah. I mean, so this is my shameless plug. Like, if you haven't seen it already, you've absolutely got to go to the Flat Earth Credit Union website and check it out and see what we're talking about. We'll obviously have links to it and all of the promotional stuff for this podcast. But that what I thought was really funny. Like, so Caleb on my team who initially, fielded that response that you sent in and found it, he's a total data junkie and he's just a brilliant dude. And so, I mean, he went off the deep end real fast on this, Laszlo, and like he was doing a ton of research on it. And that was what like got him so excited and why he was just so amped up over it, was he was like, man, whoever did this, like, really put some work into it. And he's like, I went through and tried to reverse look up like where this person was or where this website was created. And he's like, they went to the detail of actually putting, what is it? It's like Houston Space Center, right? Or what was it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the address.
As the address. And it's like, at any point in time, you could have very easily just put like some generic, 1, 2, 3, 4, any street in America address. But like you went and looked up the address for the Houston Space Center, put that, like, it's clever stuff. But so have you had other people like reach out to you through it? And I'm just curious, like, what kinds of stuff, have you ever had somebody reach out and be like, hey, I'm with you. I believe the earth is flat and I would like to be a member of this credit union. Like,
we've had form submissions over the years. I sometimes respond to them. Sometimes they just go to a generic Gmail, but I try and respond to them when I get to them. After your LinkedIn post, I got like job offers through it. It was wild. I was like,
really?
I mean, I guess we can touch on the second point there about, it's obviously not a credit union website. And, it was community banks and a couple of credit unions are like, did you really build this? And can you build one? And it was kind of eye opening. There's I guess there are a lot of antiquated websites out there, that are maybe a little bit less user friendly. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'd be, love to dive into that aspect.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, right? This is not a topic that we've been a stranger to on this podcast. I've probably had quite a few guests that have brought this up, from folks that have been in the industry, out of the industry, at marketing agencies, in marketing roles at credit unions, you name it. But, like I said, I'm not shy about being one of the ones to say that as a whole, our industry does a really poor job of marketing. It's just the fact of the matter, right? And I'd love to get your perspective as somebody who has done, real true e-com, talking about customer acquisition costs, what it actually looks like to do, how we're seeing, the Chimes, the Revoluts doing that versus the credit union industry. But when we talk about, the credit union industry as a whole just doesn't do a great job of marketing themselves, I think that did really shine through in just when I posted that link to the website that you built. And I think I'll have to look it up maybe while you're talking if I can multitask, but if I can find quickly his exact comments. But I want to say it was Ron Shevlin who made some kind of comment to the effect of, he was like, yeah, did this really fool you that it was a real credit union? Like, did you really have to do research? Because I knew it wasn't a real credit union the second I saw that it was a really nicely developed, pretty website. And I was like, man, that kind of stings, but he's also not wrong. Like, if you look across the industry. So as somebody who came from outside the industry and into credit unions, like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons for websites being the way they are in the credit union and community bank space. I think, there used to be this focus on the marketing website, right? I'm not talking about digital banking right now. I'm talking about the marketing website, whether it's hosted with WordPress or, or run through WordPress or Drupal or whatever it's on, that's for your members. And that's for engaging with your members and maybe educating them on how to do things. And for the most part, that's not true. If you look at traffic coming into your marketing website, they go to your website and then they go to log into digital banking, or they go to call your phone number, or they go to your branch locator. And that's junk traffic, right? I mean, it obviously serves a purpose, but it's not where you're going to see ROI. It's not your goal to grow the credit union by getting people to go to a page and log in somewhere else. And so, the credit unions and community banks added all this content to websites, and we're guilty of this here as well, not just other banks and credit unions, but you just have all this content and you okay, I want to update my website. I'm going to move all this content over and not really change the hierarchy or change the structure of how everything is set up. Whereas you look at the e-commerce space and websites focus on one thing, and that's selling. So, there's a homepage, it features the key products, and they know what the key products are. They're, for us in the credit union space, it's probably going to be checking. It's probably a certain type of loan, maybe some other, ancillary services. And they emphasize those. And then each of those products has a very purpose-built landing page that's built to convert, right? You add the card, you open an account. And that's the flow that people are used to when purchasing things. And people purchase things from Amazon every day, multiple times a day. They go to Best Buy, they go to Target, they use the apps. They're used to that flow of, I see a thing, I add the cart, I check out, or I see a thing and I buy now. And credit union and bank websites are often, I see a thing, I read all about it, I click like open now, I go to another thing, I have to type in all my information, I have to find the thing again in the selection of products. It's counterintuitive. And, in today's, fintech driven and mega bank driven landscape, that e-commerce experience has been duplicated. If you want to open a Revolut account, they're a great example of a fintech that makes account opening easy. You don't even spend time on the Revolut website. You go to their website, you download their app, and then you're filling in your information in the Revolut app. And typically in less than 3 minutes, you've got an application that's been pre-filled, using maybe your phone number and some other third-party data source, and that's been decisioned. And you have an account, you have an instantly issued virtual debit card number, and you're good to go. If you compare that to what the experience is like at a bank or credit union of our size, very often, you have an insanely high cost for acquisition. I mean, the numbers I think for a checking account are $300 to $500 to acquire a checking account, right? So that's what you're spending in ads and application fees and whatever else just to get an account opened. So you're spending all this ad money taking people to a landing page where the action that you want them to take, which is ultimately opening an account, it's 10, 12 steps away. So you're putting them through this essentially a meat grinder to get to the thing that they want, which is arguably you have a good checking account or a good loan offer, but people lose their attention span is limited, especially with TikTok and Instagram and everything being so force fed content, and short attention spans are just kind of taking over. You want to make the application process as simple as possible. So that's kind of been my focus here at the credit union since I started is, taking the customer journey and meeting their expectations that they've developed through interacting with e-commerce sites or social media apps, things that have very clean user interfaces and user experiences, clear calls to action, no redundant page views or clicks. Everything is meant to get the customer through the journey as seamlessly as possible.
This is something else we've kind of talked about a few times, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Is I personally also believe there's an interesting thing at play for especially credit unions. I think community banks, not as much, but especially in the credit union space where we're very much about the not-for-profit cooperative movement, right? Sales is totally a 4-letter word to us. And so a lot of times I feel like we're reticent to sell our products. And we're like, well, we'll talk about it and we'll do things kind of the way we've always done them. And then just when people need them, they'll just come from, they'll just know that we offer them, right? As opposed to like what you're talking about that is, kind of clearly pulling somebody from our marketing all the way through a lead funnel to qualify them as a good lead and put them into a product to sell them. And when we think about it that way, yeah, it sounds kind of dirty. Like, right, we're this not-for-profit and we're trying to, get leads and sell them things. But ultimately, what you're selling them is probably a better financial future and picture than they would have somewhere else. So yes, you're selling them something, but they're going to buy it from someone. So they're going to buy it from Chase or they're going to buy it from you. I will argue your credit union is going to take far better care of that individual and their community than Chase is. So I'd rather see you sell them the product, but you got to sell it to them. Like, don't unsell it.
Right. But, I think most of us at credit unions believe that we are selling, or providing a better product or service than our competitors, but we have to get that message out there. And we have to be cognizant that consumers often take the path of least resistance. So if they're going to have to wait a day or two or go to a branch to open an account with you, and they need an account, or they're tired of their overdraft fees or whatever else they're dealing with at their other institution, they'll go to whoever can give them that instant decision. And yeah, obviously you don't want to sell people products that are misleading or don't suit their needs. But if you have members that are coming in, you want to know that that member won't be turned away because of this convoluted application process, which, again, we have very limited insight into because of the oftentimes third-party providers that are used for account opening.
Yeah, no, that brings up a really good point, right? Because so there's kind of two parts to this, and one is just, so let's take the example of somebody that's complete unknown to the credit, and we're trying to grab them as a brand new member. So you have one, just getting messaging to them that resonates with them, that makes them want to convert on a product, i.e. become a member, open a checking account, open a loan, etc. Right? But then at the same time, then there's the actual process of converting. And really that should be technology. So you've got kind of the marketing element, the technology element. And, as you were talking, it's funny, I was thinking about, even in my own personal life, right? I'm kind of a car guy too. And I think about, the places that I want to buy car parts from. And if somebody gives me an ad on Instagram for a car part that I want, and then I click, shop now, I'm interested. It takes me right to a page, takes me right to the product, tells me exactly what it's going to fit my car, etc. And all I have to do is check out with Apple Pay. I'm going to be significantly more likely to convert on that product than if you take me to a website, I have to go rehunt for my product again. Then I have to confirm that it's going to fit my vehicle. And then it's going to put me through a painful old school shopping cart process where it's like, tell me all your information, manually input your credit card information, all of that, right? Like, I'm going to convert a lot higher probability on the first example. And you're kind of talking about that in the same sense of, converting members to products, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I worked in e-commerce, we were one of the first Magento sites using Affirm, and they've blown up. When we added, if you're not familiar, Affirm is a buy now, pay later provider that's hosted on e-commerce sites. And then, when we added mobile wallet support, it's just every step of that purchasing process is an opportunity for them to get distracted or change their minds. And the easier you make it, the more likely you are to make the sale. And so we're taking that same approach with, the products that you open at the credit union. So, we recently converted to a new digital account opening platform. It's a relatively new startup called Glide. And they were the only provider in the space that was able to surface data layer variables in Google Tag Manager. So what that is, their application not only supports Google Analytics, so we can watch the conversion funnel and see, new members interacting with the onboarding flow, but it can tell Google Analytics what type of account was opened and what, we assign some lifetime value numbers to the account type. It's based on averages, as well as, a funding amount for things like certificates. And so where that, kind of bridges the gap to e-commerce is we're all spending a ton of money on ads to acquire new members, right? It's a goal to grow the credit union, and it's really oftentimes a mystery what the ROI is on that ad spend. So if I approach an e-commerce company saying, hey, spend $10,000 on this ad campaign with me, And all I can tell you is this many people visited your website and maybe added a product to the cart, right? That's all I can tell you. There's no, they actually purchased or what the ROI was there, what the revenue was that was generated. I'm going to get laughed out of the room. And that's been the situation in e-commerce for 20 years at this point, right? And so on the flip side here is there are even more kind of nuances to becoming a member of a credit union, because you need more than just funding, right? You might look at credit reports, you check systems, there's a decisioning process that takes place. And so when you're serving ads through an ad partner or DSP, there's some level of optimization that needs to be done, right? You can either optimize on people clicking your ad, people starting an application, maybe people finishing one. But what you really want to optimize for is the people that are actually opening accounts. So even if the intent is there, the qualifications might not be. So if you're going for serving ads to members that can open a checking account, right? And you get a ton of clicks or a ton of submitted applications. What if 90% of those applicants, don't pass check systems or don't meet whatever membership criteria is required? You don't know. And your numbers from your ad provider or your ROI calculations might look great. Yep. But in reality, you could be spending a ton of money driving exactly the wrong type of potential member to the credit union. And now you're just paying to give somebody a decline or a bad experience.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that brings up a really good point, right? When we talk about just being able to track conversion metrics and drop off points for people. That is something that is severely missing in a lot of credit union experiences. And you even look at it, right? Like you were talking about in the digital account opening experience, right? If you go to, say, a Rocket Mortgage, right? Which I also find really interesting because I always ask how many people have gone through that. Like, I'm assuming you have, right? How many people have at least tried that? And a lot of people have, but then they don't correlate that one of the very first steps in that whole process is they just want to get an attribute to you. They want to know who you are and be able to attach to that so that one, they have a warm lead to follow up on. And two, you can come back at any point in time and start where you left off from any other channel. But for whatever reason in digital account opening, we don't do it that way, right? We're like, hey, we're going to do all of this stuff up front. And then, oh, by the way, you can't actually become a member, and they drop off, and then we have no idea where, but somebody entered the flow.
Yeah. And that's, it's called abandonment messaging is the most basic one, right? We grab email up front. So if at any point you get distracted, we've got your email. We send you an email saying, hey, you're almost finished, or this is your next step. Because we know distractions happen. We know that, hiccups can come up in the application or something else. And you want to reach out and be proactive and ensure that they don't go somewhere else because maybe they didn't have their funding account ready, or they couldn't choose between one checking account or another.
What kind of surprised you, maybe both positively and negatively, the most when you came into the credit union industry in terms of just kind of digital services and what it was like to acquire and convert customers?
I was very surprised by the number of different vendors that everything has to plug into. It's incredibly complex compared to e-commerce in that regard. You're looking at consumer reporting agencies, you're looking at funding providers, you're connecting to a core, you might be reaching out to a card servicing company to generate card numbers. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that obviously needs to be surfaced to potential members and existing members in a way that's easy for them to navigate. So that was a big surprise for me is, obviously on the surface, I'm like, why is it so bad? It should be so easy to do this, this, and this, which, again, with Flat Earth Credit Union doing the marketing side of it, super easy. Doing it on the digital banking side or account opening side, there are so many other layers of the onion, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that it's an important point, right? Like it's really easy for us to sit here and talk about how easy it should be. But in reality, there's oftentimes a lot of factors that go into that are just beneath the surface, right? And yeah, to your point, like spinning up Flat Earth Credit Union, you kind of had no boundaries, right? You had no legacy tech debt. You had nothing other than your imagination and a WordPress site. So it's pretty easy to spin up, make it look really good. I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe you did take it to this level, but like, did you think about ADA compliance and accessibility? And did you do all of those things? And because in a real website you do, right?
Yeah.
And then in a real website for a real credit union and for a real, new member account opening process. Yeah, you're right? Like, I wish it was as easy as just, I put products on a web page through a Shopify account and that's it. And I have WordPress and Shopify, and those are my two vendors. And I have a fulfillment center that fulfills the Shopify orders. But at a credit union, you've got to talk to core. You've got to talk to maybe, to your point, credit scoring system. You've got to talk to a new account opening platform. You've got to talk to digital banking. You've got to, like, that list starts to unravel pretty quick when you start to really dig into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the positive side, I think, there are a lot of great vendors in the space. There's, I think, more and more focus from, fintechs that want to partner with smaller financial institutions to VC companies that are investing in them, where we have a breadth of options that I think even 6 years ago, we didn't have quite as many good choices. So that's a big one. And, this isn't specific to digital, but there are long tenures at credit unions. I think people just join the industry and stay. And so there's a wealth of knowledge, and I've been, I've been lucky enough in my role here at Communication Federal Credit Union to, be able to ask all the stupid questions, all the questions that people should roll their eyes at, and they walk me through step by step, this is why we do this. This is the order things get done in. Here's the reason, because there's this concept of what should happen. There's all the nuts and bolts of what needs to happen. And then on top of that, a whole layer of regulation and other best practices. And so, yeah, the both the institution I work at and the community in general, people are very open to sharing information and ideas and talking about the projects that they're working on or have worked on. And that's allowed me to, gain a lot of institutional knowledge in a fairly short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think is super special about this industry is how many people just kind of never fall out of it, right? And I think we kind of touched on it, and just even the little I've gotten to know you over the last little bit, kind of in your introduction, it seems you're very similar. And it's like, I want to just mail it in. I do kind of want to just come to work and like do my 9 to 5 and punch out. And then you're like, gosh, dang it. Like, the stupid industry kind of sucks you in because you realize all the good that you're doing and the people that you're surrounded by and how passionate they are about the good that they're doing. You're like, well, yeah, I kind of want to be a part of that. Well, now I'm working till 10 p.m. All right, fine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I do believe that we are making a difference, and I do believe that, our members benefit, and we have data to show that they benefit from being our members and using our accounts versus the mega banks and alternatives that are out there. But if anything, that should inspire us to make these experiences better, help make it easy for members to join, and ensure that we keep growing the credit union community as best we can.
I have no idea where your head is at with this, but I'd love to get your like on the spot thoughts of one of the other things I thought was like really piqued my interest with your whole flat earth credit union concept, right? Is the idea of extremely niche bank. And obviously there's going to be a really specific type of individual that's going to want to become a member at Flat Earth Credit Union. Although I'm dead serious, like maybe we'll take this offline, but one of the folks at one of my customers' credit unions, he and I are like, we want to work with you to charter this thing just because I want to be a member of Flat Earth Credit Union. Like I want to be a card carrying member of that one. But right, like there's a certain personality that if that was a real credit union that would want to be a member of that credit union. And we're starting to see some other financial services that are really focused on very specific niches and then aligning products, services, core functionalities, cultures to that and saying, hey, we're really good at this. Come to us for this. And, if I can kind of use the example of your automotive experience, right? I think you were saying it was like German automobiles like BMW, Mercedes, that kind of thing, right? Yeah,
primarily Audi and Volkswagen. And yeah, absolutely. It's if you kind of hone in on what those consumers want, then they're going to gravitate towards you if they're passionate about a certain thing, which I think if somebody's a flat earther and they're pretty passionate about that, they're maintaining that belief, and you offer a product or service that, maybe hundreds of other places might offer, but your branding and your messaging and your core values resonate with them, I think absolutely you'll build a very strong following.
So do you think that there's a good opportunity for community financial services to try to be more niche and say, like, this is what we do and this is who we cater to? I feel like at the same time, I'm seeing a little bit of both ends of the spectrum happening, right? We're seeing a lot of credit unions that maybe used to be seg-based that are now becoming community chartered and are state chartered and are starting to open up and just say, hey, if you live, work, worship, within this area, you can be a member. And at the same time, you're starting to also see, gosh, I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head. Maybe you'll know. There was a fintech financial institution, de novo, that started up that's focused specifically on, we are the bank for people who just graduated from medical school. Like, that is their thing. And so they have very specific products and services. They understand what stage of your life you're in and what that means to you when you've just graduated medical school, right? So kind of trying to be all things to everyone versus, hey, if you, just graduated from forestry service, like, sorry, we're not it. Graduated med school, come talk to us.
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act between, trying to grow and then losing focus completely, right? And so at some point, let's say you're just a very small local institution with a community charter. At some point, you're going to reach a level of saturation where you have to expand it. But, to your point, I think there are institutions that are kind of just taking the easy way out by not really focusing on their core customers, their members, and instead, trying to expand their field of membership just because it's a numbers game, right? I mean, at some point, if you're an option that's out there, that's available, people are going to get you. It's why people bought PT Cruisers and the Chevy Aztec. It's like nobody was really thinking about making that decision. It was just one of the options, and somehow they fell into it. You can cut that out. Anyway.
My grandpa, so we're going to take a total detour on this. So my grandpa on my mom's side is the reason that I've been a car guy. He was a hot rod guy from like the way back when. And I grew up like in the shop in the summers, wrenching on hot rods with him and my uncles. And I remember the day, clear as day, that I was talking to my grandpa, and he was like, yeah, I think the PT Cruiser is actually really cool. I think I would get one. And I was like, oh, you finally lost it. Like, you finally gone senile. And he's like, hey, no, it's very practical. I was like, nope, you're done, man. Like, the day you trade in the 32 coupe for a PT Cruiser, like, nope, it's all over. But no, yeah, I mean, I think, have you seen some examples that stand out to you of people that are doing a really good job on either end of that spectrum of kind of being all things to everyone or being a very specific niche market?
I think some institutions have really good ins with certain groups and communities. Like right here locally, Tulsa Teachers Credit Union, they have, they're pretty involved in local schools. Not just in the Tulsa area of Oklahoma. They do a pretty good job of growing their membership through that. You look at, local bank, MidFirst, I mean, local-ish, but MidFirst has a bunch of sports teams that, they kind of have debit card deals with them and people gravitate towards them that are fans. Tinker Credit Union, they're the largest in our state, but they are very strongly associated with Tinker Air Force Base and have a lot of, members in the Air Force. And so they're local, they're all doing a great job. There have been fintechs, apps where you get credit for, taking a certain number of steps a day, and that might, influence your rewards that you get on your debit card purchases and things like that. But, and then as far as being broad and open field of membership, the Digital Credit Union seems to do a great job. They're pretty massive. I think they maybe have one branch location. I'll have to fact check me, but
they are a lot bigger with the First Tech merger.
Yeah, and so that just kind of shows that But both strategies are valid. It's just make sure you know which one you're picking and commit to it and know whether you're getting results or not.
That's a good point, right? It's pick a strategy, go with it. And then kind of to what you were talking about earlier, like how do you define success and how do you measure it? And then do you actually have the tools in place to be able to measure it? And that's one of the other things I was curious to see what kind of like your early, coming into the credit union industry, you were talking a little bit about just like how many systems it took to actually make one thing happen. How much of that have you had to kind of figure out, like what needs to be unpacked and unraveled? What is legacy tech debt? This is how we've always done it versus like we have to keep doing it that way because all these systems are required. Like what did you find there?
Yeah, I think, there is a fair amount of legacy tech debt. We're on an older Fiserv core that's not, it's being sunset. And so we're shopping for a new one. And so sometimes, in our case, our core does everything we need it to, but other vendors that we want to partner with, they're potentially best in class. They don't support it and have no intention to. So that's one thing that, moving forward to push certain initiatives ahead, we will have to make that change. But on the flip side, there is a lot of, we process these payments this way because that's how we've always done it. I think, that even touches on things as simple to change as UI UX, which is there's in the credit union space and banking space, there's a lot of terminology that makes sense to people in the credit union space, but not the actual people that you're trying to serve. And I think one of the first things, this is a little bit of a tangent, one of the first things that I got involved with when I started here was our CIO, Scott Mendenhall. He was on the Fiserv Carillion Advisory Council. That was our digital platform that we used to have. And in that platform, to make a payment, you would have to go to transfers, make your auto loan payment. And we do a ton of indirect lending. These people have, the only experience with us is really trying to make their car payment, right? The relationship was acquired through a car dealer. And they're like, I have your app. I'm trying to make a payment. Bill Pay says I can't use Bill Pay because you have to have a checking account because it's not to pay your loan, right? And the only other option is transfer. And then it was even worse because there's transfers and external transfers, right? And so Scott got me on this advisory council call, and they were doing this like year-end wish list, where you submit your ideas and get votes. And so I was like, hey, do you think we could add a pay now button? And it wasn't even the Fiserv people, to their credit. It was like the other credit unions on the call just started laughing at me. Like, it says transfers, just make a transfer. And I was like, okay, I get that makes sense to you. But most of the people making payments to you don't work at the credit union. And so I didn't think much of it. And I think a few months later, we went to Alpharetta, Georgia to an in-person meeting there. And Fiserv being Fiserv, they had some third party do like a focus group, about all these features, and they put it on this scale. And there was like it was like effort versus like, desirability for the end user. And so at the very top of like lowest effort, makes most sense to end users was like the pay now button. And then when they did the Carillion refresh, that was one of the first things. I was so happy. And once that pay now button showed up, we stopped getting questions.
Yeah.
And it seems so trivial and so, so simple if you're an outsider. But once you've been working here for, 5-10 years, yeah, that's a transfer. Just tell them to make a transfer. Well, bill pay is obviously not that. Bill pay is for making payments to your utilities from your checking account. And so that's kind of some of the stuff that you come up against is it's not even resistance to change. It's just a difficulty of, removing yourself from having this institutional knowledge or this habit and thinking of it as like, hey, we're trying to attract younger members. The call to action needs to match the thing that they're thinking. And now I don't even know what Gen Alpha's call to action for Pay Now is. I'll ask ChatGPT at some point in a little bit, but we might go from Pay Now to, I don't know. I don't want to use the wrong term, but we'll just have to look and see what they call it.
I'm so glad you used that example. I mean, I use that all the time too, of just, there's so many things that we do a certain way because we have that institutional knowledge. And I'm like, people don't think that way. And it's funny that you use that example because that's the exact example I've used for years too, Laszlo. It's like the whole transfers to make a payment. I'm like, nobody but people that work at a credit union think that way. Like, go ask your neighbor, hey, do you transfer money to a loan? They'd be like, no, I pay my loan. Like, what are you talking about, dude? But we get so stuck in our vernacular. And it is things like share and member and all of these terms. And then all of these different features and functions and things that we can do and ways that we can do them. I literally, last night, I have a buddy who's trying to buy a new project car out of California, lives here in Portland. And we were talking through how he was trying to transfer the payment to this guy, right? And how he doesn't want to give the dude the money until he's 100% sure in what he's buying. And the dude doesn't want to give up the car until he's got money in his account. And he's like, no, a check in hand is not money in account, right? And so they were going back and forth. And I'm just talking to my buddy about all these different things. And my buddy he's a very intelligent person, right? He works on really, really sophisticated, like electrical HVAC systems and stuff that's just like my poor little brain can't comprehend, right? But I'm talking to him about, well, would you do ACH or same day ACH, or would we do a wire? Or, hey, is his institution set up to receive FedNow? Could we do a FedNow payment? Right? And he's looking at me like I'm a moron. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, dude. I just need to pay this dude for this car. He needs to know he got it. And I don't want him to have it and it not be in my hands until I've got the car. So I don't really give a crap. Like, you two figure that out. You, the banks, figure that out. Right? But it is so funny how a lot of times, and you do see that manifest itself in things like UIs, where it's like, transfer. You're like, I'm trying to pay my auto loan.
Yeah.
But yeah, your point is you got to think about it from how the person on the other side of that is going to be thinking, not somebody who's worked at the credit union for 20 years.
Yeah. And we got rid of share. We renamed them primary savings. I think that was last year. That was a little bit of an internal battle, and we had to announce it to members saying, hey, the name is changing, and I need membership. Membership is a touchy one because that's what differentiates credit unions, right? But if you tell an average consumer what do you think of when it's a membership, you think of a recurring monthly charge, like when you set your New Year's resolution to go to the gym and you get charged every month. It's February, you've completely given up, and you're still being billed, $75 a month, and you're trying to cancel this thing, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, you're a member, it's potentially free. It might be a one-time fee if there's some sort of affiliation you have to join. But it's just some of these things that we have to be cognizant of where, in our little worlds, they have positive connotations or simple explanations, but to the people that we're trying to reach, right, they can mean completely different things.
Yeah. Well, and I think you kind of touched on it a second ago too, right? Even if we talk to our current membership base, right? And I don't know, I feel like I'm at that stage in life where, people I think are old call me old, and people that I think are young call me old, or whatever. I think I got that backwards, but I'm like old enough now at this point that I've been around, I've been in credit unions, been a member of a credit union for over 20 years and that kind of thing. Like, I'd like to think I'm kind of an old credit union member in that sense, but I'd also like to think I'm still pretty young, right? So I'd like to think I still, identify with the younger tech savvy group. But even in my own world and members like me, we still have to kind of educate on what does this terminology mean. But could you imagine to somebody who, is a 17-year-old today, and just walking up to them on the street and starting to use some of this vernacular to them about why they should do their banking with you versus just using their Venmo account like they are now?
Yeah, or just a checking account versus a debit card. I mean, there's like a whole disconnect there if you get young enough. They just think of having a debit card or, Cash App or Venmo. That we advertise checking accounts, and that's kind of a disconnect there. If you get, I think, in the mid 20s and younger, they just want a debit card. They don't want a checking account. I mean, I can't remember the last time I wrote a check. So it's stuff like that. And there's a lot of other areas of the industry that can be kind of improved, I think, as a whole, if we push our vendors to do better and ourselves to kind of catch up with consumer expectations. And we don't need to turn into fintechs ourselves, but we can absolutely see what parts fintechs are doing right and give those same benefits to our members.
That's an interesting thought, Laszlo. As you were talking about it, I was thinking, at scale, it's really easy to change public perspective, right? So I don't know, I'm trying to think, are you a Gmail user by chance?
I am. I was an invite-only Gmail user.
Gmail did a huge UI refresh this morning, at least for our corporate account. It looks really, really nice. They changed a bunch of different things. But if Google all of a sudden stopped calling it email, right, and started calling it something new, I would probably be like, what? Huh? For a hot minute. And then I'd probably be over it, right? I'm like, all right, well, Google just calls it something else, like it's moved on, like that's the new terminology for email, right? But I think if, I don't know, like the local community email provider tried to change email's name on me, I'd be like, what are you guys trying to pull? Like, no, knock it off, right? And so where I'm going with that is you made me start thinking about, so can one credit union start to change the public perception of, do we even need to call it a checking account? Or does the whole industry need to decide, like, hey, we need to start changing some terminology because, the younger demographics that we're going after, they just don't communicate that way anymore. And I'm a huge fan of, probably also why I loved your Flat Earth credit union, right? Like, of really obnoxious examples to make my point. And I always use this point when we're even doing like discussions about UI and terminology on buttons and things. And I always make the comment, like, if your credit union doesn't call it transfers or moving money, if they call it like shifting your cheddar, right? If that's like the vernacular of your membership base, right? And then they log into digital banking and it says transfers, there's going to be a disconnect. So it needs to say, shifting your cheddar. So do we need to start having those types of conversations as an industry or even as an individual credit union, that maybe we need to start trying to push changes to the terminology that's more aligned to the next generation of members, or whatever we call them, of our credit unions versus the people that are doing it now?
Yeah, absolutely. Or, you can A/B test it if you want to. You can offer both. You can make a landing page for a debit card and one for a checking account, right? They open the same product inevitably at the end and see how they perform. But I think with debit cards, that's just happened over time, right? It's not one entity pushing it. It's checks are becoming obsolete. Debit cards are the new thing. Mobile wallets are the new thing. And so we just need to accept that that's happening. You can look at the data and Google Trends and elsewhere and look at what the fintechs are advertising and, follow that, especially if you're having an issue attracting younger members, because that's probably part of the disconnect. On the flip side, if you're doing something new and original as a credit union, which I think absolutely every credit union and community bank can come up with a cool new product and new spin on things, then you might corner what it's called. It's like, nobody calls action cameras. Everybody calls it a GoPro. You can spend all the money in advertising in the world and they're still going to call your product that's not a GoPro. And that's just, an example of how, coming up with a new product or a great idea, gives you the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, that is fascinating how those vernaculars have become a part of our everyday lives. Like, I don't even, if I say I'm going to not drive myself, I just say I'm an Uber. Even though I haven't taken an Uber in years, Laszlo, I use Lyft. I still call Lyft Uber. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get an Uber. And then I get a Lyft.
Yep. GoPros, Kleenex. I mean, there's a bunch of examples. And what's fascinating about Uber is taxis, cabs were a thing. And Uber just came in and took over. I mean, nobody says I'm going to call a cab. If anybody's driving you somewhere, they're Ubering you.
Yeah, I know. But that's kind of what I was thinking is you think about using that like Uber example, right? And they come in with a massive amount of Silicon Valley VC money. It's a direct consumer product. They're kind of completely redefining a space with something new versus how does a credit union kind of reinvent themselves the same way Uber reinvented getting transportation. And this is kind of one of the other topics that I feel like comes up a lot on this podcast, is the idea that you kind of have to disintermediate yourself or someone else will, right? You always have to be evolving. You can't just keep doing things the way you've always done them. So how do you see, credit unions, community banks needing to think about, like, how do you become your own Uber example in the taxi world to yourself?
I mean, that's a really difficult question. I think if I could,
You don't have the answer like spelled out to give to everybody?
if I had the answer, I would not be telling you, Josh. I'd be running into our CMO's office right now. But, it's one of those things where I think the credit union philosophy and, kind of the kumbaya stuff that we preach about being not for profit and member owned and, not paying, paying out, executives tens of millions of dollars and making risky loans. I think there's a lot of appeal to that. I think what we need to do is understand what barriers there are to potential members from joining us and becoming part of this movement. And a lot of it boils down to, am I eligible? What's a membership, right? Yeah. How we present our products. Is it a checking account or a debit card? How difficult is it to open? Is that, can I open an account at 2 a.m.? Will it be decisioned? Will I have to wait until the next day? And I think until we get all those other pieces to the same level as our competitors, and, some people will say our competitors are other banks and credit unions our size, but in reality, we have all the data. And I'd love to speak about that. All the data that we have, about the products and services our members use elsewhere, right? Whether it's fintech payday lending or buy now, pay later services. Until we have that same level of experience and onboarding, I don't think we need to give up on the things that make credit unions as a whole different. I think we're just saying, oh, well, we just need to keep pushing the credit union message harder and ignore, all the skeletons in the closet with this antiquated technology and manual processes and, 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think you're right. Like, in my opinion, right, is one, you can't lose sight of what makes a credit union special. And I guess this is one of those we have to check ourselves and see if we're just totally indoctrinated or if the real world thinks this. But I'd like to feel that the more I talk to people, in my personal life, that, we care about who we do business with. There's a lot of, even though I still shop on Amazon, I want to shop local. I like something that was handmade. I like the story behind the product. And in financial services, like, there's no better example of that than a credit union or even, some really good community banks. And so I think the story is there. Like you say, the touchy feely, the heartfelt stuff, that is what people will actually prescribe to. But then you have to look at, how do you make changes to what does need to change to make it easier for people to get that message, it resonate with them, and then convert. And if you, change the wrong things, it could spell disaster. If you change the right things, it could do a lot of good. But if you're just changing who you are to try and be different, because maybe you're feeling that's why we're not getting new membership, but it's actually just a conversion funnel that's broken, the messaging was great all along, then we went down a fool's errand.
Exactly. And, a lot of these improvements that are being made by us and our peers are, automations and efficiencies. And we're not on the, we don't have shareholders that are, bleeding us for, crazy earnings reports, and we're not paying $1 million bonuses to people. So ultimately those efficiencies allow our employees who, live and breathe the credit union philosophy in most cases, to have those meaningful interactions with our members and the community, which is, a big differentiator, because if we're not going to automate some process and then, get rid of 10% of our staff. We're going to find ways for those employees to, elevate the credit union. When you're going into a branch, if you're waiting around because somebody has to decision your application because we don't have automations in place, and they're trying to manually correct some data entry piece that was missed, right? That's a conversation they can't have about, saving you money or helping you set a budget or, whatever other questions you might have. So ultimately it is, being cognizant of making improvements that actually are improvements and not just modern technology. And there's a lot of there's a lot of the FOMO or fear of missing out marketing. When I started here, it was, AI and machine learning and APIs and SDKs were all the buzzwords. And those are all great things. I'm not going to say they aren't, but if you're on an antiquated digital banking platform, if the rest of your technology isn't where it needs to be, none of those things can become actionable in any way. And so, what you want to do is when you're making these improvements and you're gaining these insights or reports, you want to make sure that they're actionable. Because if they're not actionable, they're meaningless. I mean, if you have a report saying our delinquencies and charge-offs are becoming sky high, but you don't have any way to fix the underlying issue, right? It's essentially meaningless. You're just bracing for impact or merger or whatever is going to come your way. And so that's really the importance of kind of having a digital first mindset, because unless you're going to hire a massive call center 24/7 to call and give personalized advice to members, you need to have near real-time analytics and insights and surface those to members, whether it's a next best action, a next best product, or just a simple hey, this is where you got gas the other day. It's actually cheaper down the street, for example. It's making it actionable, but also, I guess one caveat with data is you want to personalize it, but not be too creepy. And, part of my little need to take things to the extreme, this was another April Fool's pitch. I didn't learn my lesson the first year, but banks and credit unions, nobody has the level of first party data that we do. I mean, it's insane. We know your age, we know your address, we know what kind of food you like to eat, when you get lunch. I mean, if we really wanted to, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and we have a hard time getting youth members. So this is my $1 million idea. So if somebody steals it from your podcast, I'm going to be really disappointed. But, and we're combating romance scams, right? All the time. One of the most common types of scams. There's a loneliness epidemic. We've got AI. We've got complex data warehouses and all these models built. We could match a member with another member. We know they're both single. They might get tacos on Tuesdays, maybe two streets apart at different food trucks, What if their face just showed up, and we know that their, financial compatibility is important. We know they're maybe both frugal and have good credit scores, so there won't be some, spats over finances. What if we just say, hey, hey, John, Sarah's single. She likes getting tacos. Swipe right, and you can agree on a taco truck next week. And then bam, 9 months later, we get a youth member. We're getting youth member goals met. But it is that, that kind of unconstrained, almost irrational level of iterating products and ideas is where Silicon Valley is at. It's where the fintechs are at. And, obviously we're not going to launch member-to-member dating. We're not going to launch mobile cash deposit where a drone comes out and grabs your cash because we got geolocation on your app, right? But there are people getting, ideas that are almost as crazy as that and running with it and making viable businesses out of it. So we just need to make sure that the insights that we get, that we make them actionable and we make them deliver value to the members and also help the credit union improve. So that means, having a digital banking platform, which is the main touch point that you have, right, with your members, the one that's there 24/7, the one that they check multiple times a day, and surfacing that information there and making them able to do that action that you want them to take.
I asked you, what do you think credit unions need to do to disintermediate themselves before someone else does? And you said, I don't think I'd have the answer on the spot. I think you have the answer. I think you just gave it right there. I mean, it is that you almost have to have that Silicon Valley level, almost think tank innovation lab within the credit union, right? You got to talk about these crazy ideas like a member-to-member dating app, because sometimes you might actually come up with something. But I think a lot of times, even more so than you come up with we're going to do this whole member-to-member dating app, to your point, right? Then you start talking about things that are like, oh, wow. Actually, we were joking about just seeing if I forget your example now, like John and Susan both realize that, they get tacos on Tuesday. all of a sudden you're like, wow, actually, we have a lot of members that are getting tacos on Tuesday. Wow, we have a lot of members that go to this one taco stand, right? Hey, we could do actually, a member appreciation drive at that taco stand. And that might be a great way to get new members as people who aren't members come to the taco stand. Because, people who buy this product on Amazon are likely to buy this product. So if you're likely to buy tacos at this taco stand as a member, maybe you will as a non-member and you'll join us as a member, right? I mean, you start to just have those crazy ideas and they snowball out of control sometimes and just become flat earth credit union jokes. But sometimes they actually become something really real. And I think you do have to have that level of being willing to have crazy conversations because somebody else is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as long as the idea doesn't push members away and you have a way to go back at the end of a campaign or a trial run and say, hey, this meet the objective we had in mind, then it's silly not to try it, right? I mean, depending on the level of effort it takes to get running.
Yeah, well, I think that's a big part of the equation there, right? Is I think it's so important this is not just talking about, credit unions trying to get new members. I mean, this is a conversation we have in our business, and I'm sure you have in different areas. It's how do you define success, right? So how are we going to define success out of that? And then does this project, campaign, thing that we are going to do, does that have a potential to impact what we define as success? And then how will we measure it? And then, of course, in your space, right, you do have to add that layer of, like you talked about earlier, the regulation, the compliance, the trust element, right? Yeah. And you especially, want to not be too creepy. I think if I just logged into digital banking for the first time and they were like, hey, we see that you're, single and you might want to get tacos with Sarah. I'm like, I read my data wrong. I'm actually married, 2 kids, happy. Really good. Thank you. I hope my picture didn't show up in her profile. That's awkward. What are you guys doing over there? I think maybe I'm going to go ahead and close my account and go somewhere else, right? Like we got to balance all of those things. But if you're looking at, well, how do we define success? What is going to differentiate, our offerings and why would someone want to be a member with us? Does this align to that? And then if it's crazy enough, it just might work.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are examples of, companies that have done that. I mean, it's the Venmos and the Cash Apps of the world. Well, you're just moving money. Like people could do that all the time. They could just write a check or hand you cash. What do you mean I'm going to use my phone to do it? And now, Apple and Google and everybody else supports it.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it funny how some of those things, like you trace back to, it wasn't even that long ago where if you had told somebody this idea, you'd be like, that's absolutely bonkers. You're crazy. But now today it's a part of everything we do, right? Like,
what do you mean you're sending somebody money you can't get back that you don't even know? Like, why would you do that? Now everybody's got it.
I love the idea of like the whole Uber example, right? Like in my lifetime, I remember my parents being like, don't ever get in a car with a stranger. And now we're like, hey, we've made it so easy for you to get in a car with a stranger. We want you to do it all the time. Right? And you're like, if I had told my mom back then, hey, I'm going to use my phone to just call up a stranger to drive me to the grocery store, she'd be like, absolutely not. You are not. And now I do it all the time. You know what I mean? So something that seems crazy and radical today, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, may not be so crazy. And it may be just the thing that sets you apart and differentiates.
Yeah.
Maybe it's flat earth credit union. I don't know.
Maybe. Got a lot of the bells and whistles, We've got Flat Earth Credit Union has clear call to actions. It has functioning deep links that open up your app, and that's low hanging fruit, right? And that's another thing that we didn't touch on is there are a lot of institutions that are not making the most of the platforms that they're on. And we were guilty of that with our prior platform. We're on Alchemy now. We might not be using Alchemy to its fullest either. So that's a really important thing is to sit down when you're doing these conversions and implementing new products and services that don't do things the way that you've always been done in this new thing, right? Because there's oftentimes a better way to do it or a new feature that you can use. And, sometimes even the vendors that you work with might not, the people implementing for you or the support people after the fact, they might not have the full breadth of knowledge of your platform because there's so many vendors that they support or whatever else. And so there's a lot of value in networking and also holding your vendors accountable, saying, hey, this other credit union that I know was able to do this campaign this way, and this is how it showed up to its members. Can we have that same thing? And, sometimes you have to be a little pushy and abrasive, but it is important to not just jump to the next best thing for the sake of having a digital transformation, but making sure that the platform that you're on, you're making the most of, which can be very easy to miss. And there's sometimes release notes that might be, glanced over, and other issues with, maybe communication on their part. But there's a good chance if you're on one of the modern digital banking platforms or account opening platforms, there are steps that you can take to improve your results. And that's like, the first thing you should be doing before you look at some other products or demos.
That's so well stated. And I think we're all guilty of that, right? I mean, but I did you really just tell me you don't read every line of every release note? But it's true, right? And even I'm sure we're all guilty of this in varying degrees of one, if you're the credit union, not looking at everything that your vendor has. And then sometimes on the vendor side too, right? We get complacent and we're like, oh yeah, no, of course my credit union knows everything that I offer and all that. And they don't. We didn't tell them. All right. And so
this is not to make you look bad, Josh, but once I'm a Typhone customer, and this might not be the case with Typhone because I'm not a Typhone customer, but once I'm a Typhone customer, my success is not necessarily as important to Typhone as maybe signing up a new customer. So, a lot of vendors don't have somebody in place, and maybe Typhone does, but they might have a person in place to help you optimize your results on their platform, right? Which a lot of times, Alchemy, I'll give them a lot of credit for what they do. They have a community forum website where we can all, grab our pitchforks if we need to, if something's really not happening. And they give us an opportunity to collaborate and discuss issues. And a lot of times there are, clients having issues just because they're not aware of how they can leverage a feature to their advantage. And sometimes people try to do something that they think is new, but if they just look at the campaign a little differently, they could see that it's actually this other thing that we could do through this method that already exists. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. And so I think that's really important is, especially with this technology, like the digital member facing platforms that change so quickly, is having those calls, whether it's peer calls or calls with the vendor or clients, to make sure that they're making the most of it. Because eventually, if they're on your great platform and they're not using it in the best way, and that leads to them being merged to another digital banking platform, you're going to lose a bunch of users and clients. And it is really in the vendor's best interest to iterate the products and also educate the clients on how to make the most of it.
No, I'm really glad you said something, because it is really true that, I think the superpower of this industry is collaboration. It's collaboration amongst the credit unions, it's collaboration amongst the vendors, and then it's kind of that commingling of all of that. And there's no way we're going to service every single credit union in this country. Same with all of the digital banking providers, right? And just like no one credit union is going to be perfect for every single consumer in the US, it's finding what's the right fit for you. How do you define success, right? And collectively as an ecosystem, like we need to build up and support our credit unions. Like that's the whole point of this whole thing. And there's a lot of really good people out there that got into this business to do good. And I think if a lot of times we just take a step back and kind of re-sit at the table and have conversations and collaborate, like there's a lot that can be done, right? It's not always, oh, we're on this legacy tech stack, therefore it's garbage. We need a digital revolution. A lot of times we be like, actually, you know what? There's a lot we can do with this. There's a lot of tweaks that can be made. And like you were saying earlier, there's a lot of low hanging fruit that, yeah, we want to get to this, AI megabot that, can do member to member dating apps and all of this. But you know what? Actually today, let's just see if we can help with, I don't know, subscription management costs. That'd be a simple thing, right? So there's a lot that can be done.
Yeah. And you have all the data, right? If we have all the data, we know what services members are going elsewhere for. We know what our staff are spending time doing that's manual, that could be automated. And it is a lot of work to automate stuff. It's a ton of work, but it ensures more consistent results for the members, the credit union, ultimately there's really no turning back. Your competitors are doing it if you aren't.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny that you got into this industry. You were saying actually at one point that like you've always been kind of interested in financial services, right? And you kind of played around with, opening different accounts at different financial institutions just to see what their customer acquisition experience was like. You were taking some of those learnings into what you were doing and everything. But I think it's pretty hilarious that you were like, all right, I'm going to get out of the fast paced world and something that I'm both personally and professionally passionate about so that I can just go to work and then be done. Now here you are. And I think it's pretty obvious you're pretty passionate about what you're doing and you're right back into it.
I am passionate about it, but the one nice thing is in the past, people would ask me what I did. I tell them in the automotive industry, they just want to talk to me about cars. I tell people I work at a credit union, and most of them are like, anyway, do you catch the game last night? Or, and this win today has been crazy, so I'm the annoying one being like, do you know what the difference is between a bank and a credit union? But no, it's a good change of pace. But yeah, I think, anybody that enjoys working and making a difference, if you join a credit union or community bank, you're absolutely going to get sucked in and try to make the most of your role. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just going back to the whole getting us connected and having you on the podcast in the first place, right? Like it really excites me to see people like you in this industry that are having fun with what you're doing and you take what you do really, really serious, right? Like it's really obvious that you take very serious the member journey that they go through and trying to better your credit union and, then bring all the benefits that your credit union brings to the community that they serve. But you're also just trying to have fun and just enjoy life and look for ways to have a laugh. And it just makes me really excited to meet people like you through this industry and see that there's people that are having fun, while doing some really serious stuff. So I'm glad we got connected, and I'm really glad you put in some, 20, 30 hours over some weekends to build a flat earth credit union. Cause seriously, I really hope you do hear this, that you made a lot of people's day with something that, you thought was kind of a silly joke. And I think that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I had fun making it, and yeah, making people laugh never hurt anyone. So
yeah, exactly. Well, hey, before I turn you loose on your day, I got 2 final questions for you, sir. So where do you go to get information about what's happening in the industry and maybe some good resources that helped you spin up on the credit union industry when you joined?
So I'm not the best example for this. As far as blogs go, like the Financial Brand, Future of FinTech, those are 2 that I keep an eye on. I think at some point I got subscribed to Credit Union Times. Not super digital focused. I think really what I try and do is I do have accounts at a lot of institutions, try and understand what they're doing, especially fintechs, because fintechs are kind of, on the bleeding edge of digital and member experiences and journeys. And that's one. And then, our department has our business intelligence team, and they, on their own, they're very driven and curious people. They oftentimes look at what members are doing, what third-party services they're using, whether it's buy now, pay later usage or, these fintech payday lenders. And they, they're like, hey, there's all these transactions going through to this vendor. What is it? They might Google it themselves. I might take a look. And that gives us a really good idea of, what product gaps we might have, because I'm not saying it's the right approach for credit unions to try and be all things for all people, but I think that's very much the mantra. But if you've got members that, you're their primary financial institution, and the next thing you know, they're using Earnin or Dave, or, they're maybe instead of using their credit card, you see a bunch of Affirm or Klarna, payments. That's an eye opener for like, okay, well, how can we regain some of this market share or share wallet with these customers? So that's really what we're looking at. Again, I think I'm also plugged into newsletters through the Flat Earth Credit Union email address that you have as well. And I do keep an eye on, what is Q2's SDK up to? What are people actually doing in there? Because you do want to see, you do an RFP every 3 to 5 years for digital banking. And you do want to know a year or 2 ahead, hey, is my vendor behind? Or what are other clients doing with this platform that I haven't yet done? And then, of course, the conferences are great. Our digital banking provider has one, Glia, which we use for customer support. has one, and sometimes you get more information from your peers about a product than you do from the vendor itself, and not necessarily in a negative way. I mean, there's been, not to put Alchemy in the spotlight, but at the most recent Alchemy conference, we've been a client for 2 years. There was a feature in Alchemy that Alchemy, I asked about, they said we don't have it, and then Connexus Credit Union, they're like, oh yeah, we've been using that. Here's how you do it. And I was like, cool. Like, I'm glad I came to this conference. This breakfast that I randomly had with y'all is the most valuable thing I've gotten out of it. And cool. It's really cool that, again, the community's just willing to be this open and share information and not just at each other's throats, using each other as competitors.
I know. Isn't that really cool? I mean, you don't see that in a lot of industries where you can go and have breakfast with another credit union that, in theory, yes, could look like competition on paper. But like you were saying earlier, right? I mean, the real competition is in totally different places. But you guys could be seen as competition, and you're sitting at the table and they're being like, oh yeah, no, here's how you turn this on. Hey, you want me to, you want me to send you the code for that? We built it. No big deal. What's your email address? Like, what industry does that happen in? It's really neat.
Not the automotive one.
Yeah.
I can tell you that from firsthand experience. But yeah, thanks again for having me on. I mean, it's been a fun talk. I don't know what the next Flat Earth Credit Union will be, but I've got some ideas.
I know now that the cat's out of the bag and like people know this is your jam. I feel like now you got to one up it. I don't know.
There's been some. I'll keep it under wraps. If I were only as good as making money-making ideas as I am at making sarcastic things come to life,
you'd be cruising the world in your yacht.
Yeah, and then I'd be getting the VC money. But no.
Well, now as it stands, anytime I see some hilarious shenanigans, it's just going to turn into a straight message to you. I'm like, is this you?
Well, I'm glad we got to talk. Hopefully we'll get to meet in person. Maybe we'll be able to catch up on the latest and greatest in the digital space again.
Absolutely. Well, if other people want to connect with you, or if they want to learn more about Communication FCU, how can they do that?
You can Google Communication Federal Credit Union or visit comfedcu.org. If you want to get in touch with me, you can just submit a form right on flatearthcreditunion.org. And in my downtime, I do log into that inbox and occasionally respond to messages. So always good seeing people discover the site and drop a line.
That's awesome. I totally want to, when this episode airs, I want like a periodic check-in with you to see the Google Analytics of the site. I'm super curious.
I'll just share the dashboard with you. So I'll do that after this call.
Laszlo, seriously, I can't say it enough. You're probably sick of hearing it, but I'm really excited I got a chance to meet you and to have you on as a guest on the podcast. And I'm really just genuinely happy to see people having fun with what they do. And congratulations again for making a lot of people stay and making a lot of people laugh with a simple website. So thanks for coming and joining me as a guest on the Digital Banking Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Banking Podcast powered by Typhon. Find more episodes on digitalbankingpodcast.com or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.